You have to get the best out of your best players, and Rafa Leao is one of the best players in Italian football on his day. The fact is, we don't see enough consistency from him.
As we are in the middle of the final round of fixtures in 2024 in Serie, I wanted to start a look ahead to the new year in the form of New Year's resolutions, what a few teams can do to start getting some better form heading into the next year. We're taking a look at these three clubs: Milan in 8th, Roma in 10th, and Juventus in 6th. As we're in the middle of this round, Juventus probably performing the best out of this lot, but some real questions around Milan and their quality of play in recent times, and for Roma having already gone through 3 managers this year. But let's start with AC Milan first, Ian, Joy.
Yeah, let's get into it.
They're a club that finished in 2nd last season in Serie, currently in 8th, having made the changes. And here are my New Year's resolutions for AC Milan. I think the first issue is solving the problems off the field with Teo Hernandez and Rafael Leao. You have to get them performing as your week in, week out best consistent performers. We can often see them on their day be the best, but that might be the best axis down the left of any club in Europe, and it needs to show week in, week out, and it has not so far this season. I think they've figured out balance, because it seems like they can either attack or they can defend. I think in the last few weeks they've erred more towards defending and have been pretty poor going forward. We have not seen a lot of threat. Obviously, Christian Pulisic's injury has been a part of that, and I think the issue at right back is glaring. They went and brought in Emerson Royal in the summer. That has not worked. Davide Calabria is not exactly a brilliant player either down that right side. I think if they can maybe go and bring in another player or hope for internal improvement, I think that is the weak link in that team. What do you see in this Milan side?
Yeah, I don't have many complaints with what you have there, and I'm glad that you mentioned Teo Hernandez and Leao, because to me, those are the 2 most important players in this Milan side. Christian Pulisic's putting up the numbers, and it's been good to see when he was healthy. Reinder's now stepping up to the plate, putting up the numbers. But I think those 2 players, particularly on the left-hand side, could be the 2 best players in European football if they want to be. If they're healthy, yes. But if they want to be, I want to see more consistency from those 2 guys. Now, if Milan have any chance of reaching the top 4, and in many ways, if Milan want to have any chance of being in a European place at the end of the season, you have to get the best out of your best players. And Rafa Leao is one of the best players in Italian football on his day. The fact is, we don't see enough consistency from him. And Teo Hernandez, if you keep him healthy, he's certainly up there with the best left-sided fullbacks or wing-back, whatever you want to call him, in European football. So those 2 players massively important. I think injuries are a big concern. Like, how do you keep your best players healthy? That's where I feel like they're falling short right now, because they are leaving themselves incredibly vulnerable with the minus Christian Pulisic, who's this season been probably their most important player.
Yeah, and he is dealing with injury now. It's so interesting when you say on their day or when they're at their best. Is there anything more frustrating than to be a big club, have a player that we've seen? Rafael Leao led Milan to winning the Scudetto, and yet since it's just here and there. When he feels like it, when he's up for it. There's nothing more frustrating than a when he's up for it kind of player.
You know, I'm glad you said that as well. You're saying some really common sense today, Witty, which doesn't happen too often.
Rare.
For sure. Yeah, but listen, I will say this, though. I have been criticised most recently about obviously getting after Rafa Leao with the last game where he went off, and I felt like he just didn't want to be there. And for me, I've played with players in that position. I've also seen players. Obviously, I'm normally the underdog when I'm playing a team, whether it's playing against top teams in European football or top teams in my domestic league. I've seen players just simply not been up for it. As an underdog, getting after them, knocking them off their day, and very quickly see them subbed out and somebody else coming in because they simply don't fancy it. For me, Rafa Leao is that guy. Sometimes he just doesn't show up. He turns up when he wants to, and that's my point with him. He can be a world beater if he really wants it. He just got to step up and actually step to the throne a little bit more often for me.
Now, moving over to the Giallorossi of Roma, currently in 10th in Serie A. Over the course of 2024, gone through 4 managers: Mourinho, De Rossi, Juric, and now, of course, Ranieri. But what can you see from them in terms of improving heading into 2025?
I mean, obviously, what a mess, what you just pointed out right there. I mean, it's been a disaster, sitting in 10th place. And a lot of people would say, obviously, it's a disaster of a season, but I still think there's room for improvement. So there's a point to be proven to the rest of the world that they can do a better job. Now, obviously, when I say improve the away form, it's been really, really poor from them. I mean, 4 points and 0 wins away from home is what I would call a disaster. So clearly, obviously, there's points out there for them. They've got to do a better job, and certainly not scoring goals away from home, which has been really disappointing. Only 5 goals they've scored. So the away form is a must. That has to be. The supply Dovbyk one could be competitive. I understand there were people there who say he's simply not turned up. He's missed a ton of opportunity. But for me, he's the type of player that needs supply. He needs people to give him the opportunities. Similar to Erling Haaland, where you got to create chances for him inside that penalty area for him to be lethal, to be determined, obviously, to get on the end of crosses or final passes. And he certainly has to step up to the plate and do a better job of his finishing. So there's certainly more goals coming from him. I know he's got 5 on the season so far. Now, this one, I want your opinion on this one, because I kind of gone after Tvila slightly here. I know he's conceded a ton of goals, and for me, it's too many goals. Obviously, they score goals at home, but they do concede 10 goals at home, which has been pretty poor, and 13 goals away from home, which for me is nowhere near good enough. So that has to improve. I'm trying to figure out where they need player improvement in the squad, because the roster, to me, Witty, is stacked. It's talented. I thought they would be competing top 4 easily. But the only position I see or sense of some sort of weakness would be the goalkeeper, Svilar, which maybe might be a position that they can improve on.
Maybe a fullback as well. I think that right back position could be another where they can afford to improve a little bit. But I agree with you. I mean, the only thing with Roma, though, is that it is very much names on a sheet. It is, you look at their midfield, Enzo Lefebvre and Paredes and Manu Kone and Cristante, and okay, all right, they're good there. They've got Dovbyk and Sule and Dybala and El Shaarawy, who's had good moments in the season. Okay, they're good there. Center back, they went inside Mats Hummels and Mario Hermoso with Evan Ndiko, who plays week in, week out. Yep. Yeah, they're good there, but they read like names on a sheet. They don't look like a team that at any point has delivered, or a lot of those individuals have not delivered. So for me, it's about having this incredibly talented squad of players perform on a week-in, week-out basis. I would single out Dybala and Sule as the players that most need to deliver that creative inspiration, especially if we're talking about the service and to Artem Dovbyk. He's got to be provided with something. And I don't think the team, especially when you compare it to how Dovbyk scored goals for Girona last season, it's not nearly the same support system.
Not nearly as creative, especially when it comes to comparisons between that and Girona and what Roma are. But I still think the names you mentioned there, and I won't repeat them again because you rattled off about 10 of them. I mean, they're class, right? But how do you translate that into a team? How do you translate that into team chemistry? First and foremost, you've got to try and keep the boss, obviously, at the helm. When you've gone through a couple of changes already to get to the boss that they've got now.
Stick to some kind of identity.
Yeah, I would hope that right now they're going to stick between now and the end of the season. It clearly looks like that's what they're going to do. They're going to have some sort of chemistry between now and the end of the season to get into a European place. The position they're in right now, not good enough. Away form needs to improve, and hopefully they do that. I think they can still sneak in a European place, though, because the talent is certainly there. What about Juventus?
Yeah, let's get into Juventus. Speaking of teams that are changing identities, they're in the middle of one under Thiago Motta. So here are my New Year's resolutions for them. I think strengthen their defense from a personnel point of view. They did some in the summer, but it needs more. When you look at Bremer being out for the season with an ACL, with Juan Cabal being out for the season with an ACL, that back four just does not look like a back four that's ready to compete at the highest level in the Champions League and in Serie A. And part of that is the health. They've already lost Bremer. They've already lost Cabal. Douglas Luiz has dealt with injuries. Nico Gonzalez has dealt with injuries. The big summer signings that they made to try and improve this team have not been healthy consistently enough in order to even make that kind of assessment about the quality of their play. And I think Kenan Yildiz, for me, might be the player that could be that force multiplier for this team. They've got good players. I think they need to find somewhere in their ranks a great player. Could be Nico Gonzalez if he's fit. He's shown signs in these last couple of games that he can be that talismanic figure. But you see Yildiz takes on that number 10 shirt. Having been to Turin and having seen the environment around the club, his name, his number is on the back of the jerseys they sell in the club shop. They're ready to turn him into a star. I think Kenan Yildiz has to take that next step. I think he's taken some steps, obviously remarkable what he's done already in a year to earn a regular place in this team. But if they're going to find Juventus 36 times champions of Italy level talent, it might have to come from within, and Yildiz taking that next step and that next step and that next step after that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the youngsters they've got in their ranks are players to really try and build around at some stage, but obviously it does take time to get those youngsters experience. It gives them time to obviously build chemistry around the experience you have in the squad. And under a new boss, that also takes time. What I am impressed with, and of course the 0 defeats on the season is something that is ridiculously impressive, that to me tells me that maybe Thiago Motta's going a different route. Maybe he's saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to try and win every single game here. What we're going to try and do is make it very difficult for teams to beat us. Because if defensively you're solid, which they are, I mean, they're very difficult to score goals against, certainly can't beat them in league play, you give yourself an opportunity of potentially finishing in the top 3-4 teams in Italian football. If you look at what they've done at home, 6 draws at home is far too many. If you translate some of the poor goals that they've given up and some of the poor finishing that they've had in front of goal, if you translate 5 of those 6 into victories, they're top of the table. So there's not much of a gap. But it's exactly what you said. It's about getting the better quality from your offensive-minded players. Defensively, this team is sound. I don't have too much worry about them. But offensively, how do we get Vlahovic a little bit happier, scoring goals every single week? Because that's the type of player we want to see from him. How do you get the youngsters that you mentioned, obviously, Concacaf would throw in that ranks as well, consistently performing every single week, throwing in with a goal as well, throwing in with more assists for Vlahovic, trying to be more creative, especially against the bigger teams in league play? I think you still see Juventus finish in the top 4. I'm actually going to throw it out there now. I think they do finish in the top 4. Thiago Motta's Bologna side that did finish in the top 4, they had 31 points at exactly this stage last season. They were sitting in 4th place then. This Juve team has 31 points now. I think this Juve team is better than that Bologna side. Yeah. I do think that this Juve team has enough quality to start winning more games, eventually end up in the Champions League spot.
The only thing that makes me hesitant, though, is that last year for Motta at Bologna was his 2nd season. I still think he's integrating some of his principles and establishing some things with this club.
So no top 4?
I think they'll get 5th, and that might be enough for Champions League in the new format, especially if the Italian teams continue to perform well.